Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with another PB&J card class. And in today's video, I will be sharing some cute critter stamping and coloring techniques to give these adorable critters a very soft, furry look. So we'll be making two cards today, and here's a look at the first and the second. I just adore these teddy bear stamps. I think they are the cutest, especially this one. He just has the happiest face. And to color these in, I will be using some Arteza Everblend Art Markers and some Expert Colored Pencils. And I'll give you a look at those and more about that in just a minute. So before we start, I want to mention I will have a full supply list at the very end of the video up on screen. So if you want to check out anything being used in more detail, just hit pause at that time. Here's a look at the two new stamps that I will be featuring. This first is Possum Present, and then the second is A Big Hug. And both of these stamps also have exact match dies available, and I'll link to all of the stamps and dies down in the YouTube description box below. Now, like I mentioned, I'm going to be coloring these with Arteza Everblend Art Markers. Here's a look at this set. These are an alcohol-based dye ink with a dual tip. They have a bullet nib and a chisel, and Arteza actually sent me this great set in the awesome carrying case, which is so perfect for these. Here's a look at the tip. This is the bullet tip and then the chisel. So the chisel is going to be for large areas and the bullet tip for smaller detail areas. And then to give them that furry look, I'm going to be doing some additional shading using the Arteza colored pencils. Now Arteza, the kind folks there, do have a 10% coupon code for all of you Penny Black fans, and I will put that down along with links to these coloring mediums down in the YouTube description box below. So let's go ahead and get coloring. I went ahead and stamped these onto smooth cardstock, smooth white cardstock using Memento ink. This is a safe ink for coloring with these alcohol-based markers. And I'm starting by putting on my darkest color first, where I want my darkest shadows to be. And I'm just adding that in. I'm using sort of the bullet nib to do this. This makes it really easy to stay in the lines and just add that dark color. And all of the exact marker colors will be up on screen at the very end of the video. Next, I'm going in with my mid-tone color and just sort of coloring into the white area and also over that darker color, and you can see they just blend together. So you get a nice smooth transition from dark to light. And then I will go ahead and do my lightest color. And for this, since there's so much extra area, I'm going to use that chisel tip just to quickly color the large areas. And I also am sort of going over those darker areas too so that they all blend together. With the chisel tip, you can kind of turn it on its side to get in more detailed areas, or you can just flip the marker over and use the bullet nib that's on the other end. So you can see how quickly you can color that bear and have some great shading. Now I'm going to color the bow. I'm putting my light color down just where I want those highlights to be. Sometimes I like to do this first before adding my dark colors so that I'm sure to leave some highlights in. I have a tendency to go too dark, so that's sort of a reminder to me, hey, make sure you leave some light color here where I've already colored it. So now I'm going in with my darker marker and adding that shading where I want the darkest color to be. This image is so fun to color. You can do so many different things with this bow. I think it would also look fun if you paper pieced it or did a rainbow color scheme on it. There's so many different ways you can use it. You can see here I'm going in with that chisel tip and my mid-tone color and sort of feathering that out. I switch to the bullet tip down here at the bottom. Now this color is quite different than that light color. So I'm working my way up to it, but I will go back and blend those together using that lightest color. And as far as choosing colors with these markers, I just played around on a piece of scrap paper, picking colors that were from the same color family, so like pinks and reds and this peachy color, until I found some combinations that I liked, but I found most really blended together well. So here I've got that lighter color and I'm just working in a circular motion, slightly overlapping the darker colors, and you can see them just starting to blend together. Kind of working my way down, and that helps smooth that transition from the lighter color into the mid-tone. Now I'm going to go in with those colored pencils, and for me, I just love how much this adds, especially with these furry critters. So I've just grabbed a light gray. I'm working in a circular motion in a very light pressure, starting in the darker areas where I've already colored, and then lightly working my way up to the lighter areas. And I'm not coloring everything, just adding a little bit of shading and sort of that furry texture that you get from a colored pencil. From those darkest areas into the mid-tone colors. I'm going to do the similar or same thing here on the bow. I'm so sorry, my head kept popping in when I did this. Sometimes I get carried away coloring and I forget that the camera is on. So I'm so sorry about that. But I'm just going in with a pink, and that also adds some brightness and vibrancy to this. I'll also use a darker red as well. And then I grabbed an even darker color for the grays, and I'm putting that on, but not extending it out quite as far as I did with that other color. And you can see just by adding that touch of colored pencils on this how much that adds. Now to finish off both of these cards, I use the new creative die from Penny Black called Garden Edgers. This is a really handy die if you like to make critter cards or cards with people or characters. It gives you the perfect place to sort of ground that image. So you can see here I cut that and trimmed it down. I put the sort of leafy grass in the back and then the more standard grass in the front to create a scene. And I also added a little mouse from another set colored in the same way as I did on the bear. So let's go ahead and color our next teddy bear. Now this bear is going to have a bit more of contrast between the markers, and the colored pencils are going to show a little bit more on this. So I'm starting with my darkest color, using that bullet nib just to add it here and there in just very small areas where I want the absolute darkest color to be. So kind of back here in the arms, the bottom of the face. You can see I'm not using too much of this dark color because it is pretty dark. And next I'm going to add, I wouldn't even really call this a mid-tone. This is pretty much like the lightest color, but I love that this color has a very golden yellow color to it, which I think is just a happy look for the teddy bear. So I am coloring this onto pretty much the rest of the image. There are a few areas I'm going to leave for the very lightest peach sort of tone color, but because I am coloring a large area, I'm using that chisel tip, and you can see you can get into even some small areas with that. Now these two colors do start to blend together. You can see that even though they are quite different, if you work that light color over the darker color, they will start to blend. But I wasn't too concerned about doing too much of that because we will be doing that colored pencil layer in just a minute. So here I'm just adding that up around the ears, down at the bottom of the neck, and sort of adding that up around the top of his head too. And see, I grabbed the chisel area for that, and using that larger chisel also keeps you from having sort of the brush strokes or lines from using the marker. Now for this last very light color, I've grabbed this peachy tone, and I'm just blending that, coloring it, and then overlapping a little bit of the yellow. You can see those blend really nicely together, even though they aren't that similar. Now here's where I think the magic starts to happen with this bear. I've grabbed what I would say is more of a mid-tone color, so it's between the darkest brown and that light yellow, and which is a very light pressure in a circular motion. I am blending that out, starting in the darkest areas and then working my way to the lighter areas, and using even less pressure as I work into the very lightest portions of the image. And I think this just gives him the warmest, furry look to him, which is a great match with that happy little face of his. And then you can see just lightly blending that out as I move up into these very lightest areas. So just a slightly heavier pressure in the darkest areas and then just barely touching onto that colored pencil with a circular motion in the very lightest areas. And I'll do the same up here on his, I guess they'd be his cheeks or part of his head and his ears. This is also sort of a trick if you want the look of colored pencils, but you don't want sort of the hand fatigue you can get from coloring large areas with a colored pencil. If you just put down a base with markers and then put colored pencil details on top, it can kind of save your hand and save your time, but give you that same beautiful texture that you can get with colored pencils. I'm just adding a little bit of that yellowish area here in the lightest areas. Sort of those peachy edges of the peachy areas. And we'll give him a little bit of blush here to his cheeks. And then I'll use that same color just to add a little bit of shading onto those peach areas. Kind of working that way, and just the same way, starting with a slightly heavier pressure and then very light pressure as I move into the lightest areas of the image. Just kind of going back with that mid-tone brown there over some of that yellow just to tone it down a little bit. And then I did grab a very dark brown just to sort of bring out some of those darkest areas for a little more contrast at the end, just adding tiny little touches of that here and there in sort of the darkest areas of his body and near his head. So I used the exact match die to cut that out. Again, I layered it with that Garden Edgers Creative die down at the bottom, added a sentiment and some die cut hearts, and you can also see this has our leaf stitch frames border going around the back. And the sentiment is from our Huggable stamp set, which is really great with this teddy bear image. I thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as our website and blog. And I will link to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And here is that supply list as promised. Happy stamping!